Lupa's been out for a while now, and since I've had the chance to test her out more extensively, I thought I'd deliver my more fleshed out thoughts on the character, and evaluate whether my pre-release pros and cons were accurate or not. My name is Juice, and let's get into it. If there's any one thing that I was absolutely sure of, it's that Lupa was going to end up as an absolute fusion queen. Because her kit is absolutely jam-packed with useful things that fusion teams can take advantage of, and in practice, it definitely feels that way. Fusion Red Shred is just as big as I hoped it would be. In a triple fusion team, you're getting 15% fusion res shred, and considering that every single character in the team is doing a decent amount of damage, that's quite significant. And even if you're only playing double fusion, that's still 6% fusion res shred. Obviously, whenever you consider that the main teams that this character plays in are fusion comps, this ends up being very, very powerful, and it definitely feels good to use in practice. I had also highlighted how there's a ton of inbuilt fusion damage bonus within her kit, both from her Resonance Liberation and her outro skill. But that's not all. If you were able to snag a copy of Devil Sword Dante, then at least at R1, you're able to give all of your fusion teammates 24% more fusion damage bonus. Stack that on top of what's already built into your kit, and that's a lot. And even if you weren't lucky enough to land the awesome looking sword, then she still has so much built within her kit already. She's also even able to provide some attack buffing. This lady really has it all. And in a typical triple fusion team, you're generally always going to be starting off with Lupa and then swapping into Brant Wuthering Waves, in which case, he's going to make excellent use out of the basic percent that's within her outro skill. It all just synergizes with such perfect harmony, and considering how many good specific buffs are within her kit, she really solidifies herself as being the premier fusion option. If you're somebody that's been a fan of someone like Brant or Changli for a really long time now, then I definitely advise that you get the Wolf Gladiator, because she genuinely has so much going for her in that regard. And I should also mention, it's not just those two. She's generally good for basically any fusion DPS out there, and that includes somebody like Encore. I wouldn't be surprised if she ended up being the most effective teammate for most fusion characters going forward. There's just that much useful fusion-based buffing within her kit. And with that being said, I'd like to highlight triple fusion some more, because I did emphasize how this was going to be a very strong team, and oh boy, does it feel like a very strong team. It's amazing. Brant and Changli was already a really good dual DPS team, but introducing Lupa into the mix, you've got yourself a gold mine of damage. Every single character in the team is able to contribute something significant. It's also just really easy to pull off, because each new character that swaps in is able to utilize the last character's outro skill very, very well. If you go from Lupa into Brant into Changli, and then repeat the entire process, you're going to have an absolute blast of a time. I should also say, this kind of feels like Kuro Games has completed the main fusion team, if you will. I think they're probably going to focus on other types of fusion units in the future. Now granted, like I said earlier, I would not be surprised if Lupa ended up being good for future fusion units, because she just has that much quality buffing within her kit. However, for Changli in particular, I do think that triple fusion is essentially the end of the road in terms of her premium team building. So if you're a really big fan of the Phoenix Lady, then Lupa's going to be working towards completing Changli's full best installed premium team. And we'll touch on this a little more later, but she is very good for Brant Wuthering Waves too. Also, since she takes over as the new best installed third slot teammate for fusion teams, Shorekeeper is now freed up. And considering how in demand that character is across so many teams, that's a pretty nice quality to have. Triple fusion absolutely did impress me, and I would like to point out, in Middle Tower, there isn't really anything in particular that's helping out Lupa. Yes, there is fusion res decrease. However, consider that the actual shill buff is more for Cardathea. The actual triple fusion team itself doesn't really have any specific shill buff going on right now. That's probably going to change whenever TOA updates again. There probably will be some kind of shill buff, but as for now, the really good performance that I'm getting in TOA with this triple fusion team, it feels a lot more authentic. Because there's no crazy buff in there that's making the team feel way better than it actually is. If anything, I don't know if we're actually going to see that middle tower fusion shill buff, because if you take a look at the right tower, that's where the fusion shill is. But when it comes to middle tower, there's no crazy buff that's trying to sell her. So I can honestly confidently say that triple fusion is a genuinely good team. And then I'd like to talk about Brant Wuthering Waves a bit. She definitely makes DPS Brant feel better than before. Not only is her outro skill absolutely amazing for the guy, but she just contains so many strong fusion buffs within her kit, to the point where she easily outclasses what Sanhua was able to provide him. Because don't get me wrong, Sanhua was indeed a good unit to use with Brant if you wanted to play him as a main DPS, but Lupa's definitely better. Also, considering how Sanhua basically runs the wuwa meta, it's nice to be able to free her up. So if you're very specifically a Brant main, then I do think that what Lupa offers is good. And once again, might I remind you, the performance isn't inflated, it just genuinely feels decent to play. But, as always, keep in mind that if you don't have Brant Wuthering Waves' signature weapon, then he will perform worse. And I generally just wouldn't recommend playing DPS Brant if you don't have Unflickering Valor. However, Lupa definitely does improve his DPSing performance, that's for sure. I had also highlighted how Lupa's basic percent buffing was really going to help out her value in the future. To be honest, there's not much that I can really comment on this in regards to right now, because as of now, the only character that's really utilizing this is Brant. The main reason I drew attention to this is because whenever a character has some sort of buffing in their kit that's more generalist, they end up being a pretty good substitute option for other characters, which is especially nice if you're somebody that's unable to pull for every single premium teammate, or if you're just somebody that needs help with their vigor management. The most prevalent example of this is basically any second salt teammate that has skill percent buffing, because a lot of strong DPSs like to utilize it. In the future, if we end up getting more DPSs that utilize basic percent, she's gonna end up being a good option for them. The thing with Camellia is that you'd rather just use Sanhua, and to be honest, Sanhua's a 4-star that has a lot of basic percent buffing in her kit, so there's not really any particular reason to pick Lupa when Sanhua's right there, but you also have to consider that Sanhua's extremely contested, so it is realistic that you might want to use Lupa instead as a free-up option. Nevertheless, it's not really like this is some huge point of value for her right now, and I don't think it's going to be as useful as, say, a skill percent buffer because Sanhua exists. Seriously, that woman ends so many meta careers. But it's still a nice quality of her kit. Perhaps not something that's going to be abundantly useful in comparison to what Sanhua's able to offer, especially when you consider that she gives more basic percent, while Lupa's just way better utilized in fusion teams. And chances are, if you're pulling Lupa, you're getting her because you have the fusion characters, and you're basically never going to be separating this Wolf Gladiator from them. But hey, it's still something to consider. I also mentioned how she's going to be nice for folks with skill issue, because she helps you recover from interruption. While this is true, there's something else I noticed that makes her feel really nice to play. Whenever she does her enhanced Forte attack, she can't get interrupted. The enemy pauses, and she just gets to finish her ability. This is so nice, and the reason why I'm pointing this out is because take Brant for example. His Forte nuke is a very large part of his damage output. It's very, very strong, but it's so easy to get interrupted. Even if you're playing well, he can just get knocked out of it very easily and you'll lose out on a big chunk of damage. But Kuro Games literally worked in a workaround to this within Lupa's kit. That is just so awesome, and I'm really glad that they did that because oh my goodness, is it really annoying having to reset when you lose like 2 Brant anchors in a row. At this point, if I just lose one of them, I just keep the run going because I'm like, you know what dude, fine. But with Lupa, she just doesn't have this issue, so it's really, really nice. She's also just not that hard to play, and generally makes fusion characters feel a lot more smooth to use. So yeah, all around, a very nice character if you have skill issue. She's also able to do personal damage, and it's not just a little bit. It feels like she genuinely contributes a good amount of damage, and I really, really like that. I think that's awesome, because every single party member is dishing out damage. And you might be thinking, isn't that a little bit too overtuned? This character has insane buffing on top of great personal damage capabilities. I think it's mostly balanced out by the fact that she's a very niche character. Yes, she can technically work in other teams if you need the basic percent, but so much of her value is locked behind fusion characters, and she really wants to play in those teams in particular. That is where she is best utilized, and for those teams, she fits like a glove. Her kit also just feels like it fits very well with the other limited fusion 5-stars, which I actually covered in detail. Very good, honestly. I'm quite impressed. I'd say the only real flaw that she has is that she's fusion specific, but can this really be counted as a flaw? She's a more niche unit, but I'd say that works in her favor. You don't have to pull for her if you're not really somebody that's interested in the fusion archetype as a whole. Yes, she does lose out on quite a lot of value if you're not using her with those particular types of characters, but that's who she was made for. She's not really going to provide a whole lot of value to an account that doesn't have a single fusion 5-star. Like if you're somebody that doesn't even have Encore and you don't have any of the other limited 5-star fusions, then yeah, Lupa's not really going to do much for you, to be honest. Like, she's amazing for those particular teams, but if you don't have access to any of them, then she's kinda just gonna sit there and look cool. I mean, hey, awesome if that's good enough for you, but for most people, they're gonna want to have a proper team to play her in. I think it's fine that she's not particularly a generalist. We already have a generalist fusion in the form of Changli, and Brant Wuthering Waves also feels like he's a pretty good generalist. So, all in all, I think it's a perfectly fine flaw. So now for the moment you've all been waiting for. Where do I currently think that Lupa stands in the meta? I honestly think that she is one of the most solid units we've gotten in recent times. I'm really happy with her. She is specific, but she's not insultingly specific. It's not like a negative status situation. She's really good for fusion characters, and basically any fusion character. She feels like a great character to pick up if you're somebody that likes to invest a lot in one particular team archetype and see amazing results come from it. And I really, really like that. I think that's awesome. Because you don't really need her. Like, yeah, she is really good for these particular teams, but you can still use those characters in basically any other team and do just fine. However, she still does offer you that playstyle, and I think that's awesome. So for what she was intended to do, I think she's fantastic. Yes, she's not the most general unit out there, but I think she accomplishes her job very, very well. So for that reason, I think she's amazing in her niche, but not really needed otherwise. Skippable, but valuable. So all around, pretty well balanced in my opinion. I do think that's pretty cool. I've always liked how the fusion units have been designed in terms of their kit, because it feels like they're very versatile. Not in the sense of, oh, they can work in a lot of teams, but it's a really mid option, so who cares? No, it feels like they work in a lot of teams that you would realistically be playing. So they end up feeling genuinely useful to an account. Any of them are going to end up providing you value, but I do think that Lupa is easily the most specific of a lot, and is mostly intended for people that have already invested a little bit in fusion. Even if you have just one, including Encore, you'll get great value out of her. So for that reason, I'd say that if you're really into this archetype, then go for her, she's great. But otherwise, she's really not that needed, even if you are into the archetype, because you can use these units literally anywhere. Good stuff, Kuro. But what do you think about Lupa? Are you happy for Kit? Let me know down below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. I have a silly second channel where I just kind of post whatever. Head on over and subscribe if that's something that you're interested in. Hopefully this video was able to tell you my more fleshed out thoughts and feelings on Lupa now that we've had her out for a while. This has been Juice, signing out. And she really lives up to her name as a gladiator.